So I'm going to talk about how to make a gelatin monoprint using a reference image. I've created a little jig here out of foam core. One flap holds my paper and the other flap is going to raise my paper high enough that it aligns nicely with my gelatin block. So the first thing we're going to do is choose a reference image. So here I've got an image of a robot that I picked, and I found this on the internet. It's just for practice. So I'm setting it underneath my little flap of plexiglass that I have taped down. The next thing I'm going to do is mark my paper edges. Now I've already done this ahead of time, but what I did is I have a 5x7 piece of paper and I put tape around the edges of it so I have a nice 5x7 box, and I'm centering my image under there. Next I'm going to place my gelatin block. So I already have my picture underneath here. And I got my little block of gelatin, which is 4x6 inches, and I'm picking the smooth side. And I'm going to set that centered within those blue tape lines so that my image is underneath it. The first thing I'm going to do is clean it off so that it doesn't get my paper dirty right away in case there was any schmutz on my block. I want to get that nice and clean. The next thing I'm going to do is take my 5x7 sheet of paper, and I'm going to align that with my blue lines, and then I'm going to use masking tape to tape that down to my little jig that I've made. So here I have my handy dandy masking tape, and I'm just going to use enough that it makes a nice hinge on each side, and that's going to keep my paper in place so I can flip it back. Now I actually get to start painting. Right here I'm using yellow tempera paint straight out of the bottle. This is the cheap stuff that you can get at the art supply store or pretty much any craft store. It is pretty good about washing off your paintbrushes, and it's easy to work with and kind of fun. So I'm just quickly and easily painting in a background, and I'm not trying too hard to get all the details perfect. I'm just going to fill in the background area around my robot. Okay, that looks good enough. Now I get to flip my paper back off of its little hinge, and I'm just going to use hand pressure. I'm holding it with one hand so that I don't accidentally shift it while I rub it with the other hand. Not pressing that hard, and when I pull it up I can peek under and see that I've got my first color. It's pretty easy to clean your block. Just a little mist of water and a paper towel. Of course, you can use rags too if you have those. And it comes off pretty easily, and then you'll have a nice clear block again to start again. And for my next color, I'm going to do the blue areas. Now, often people like to do the dark areas first. I don't know what made me decide I was going to do the highlights first. So I've got a light blue here, and I'm doing the light areas of the blue parts of the robot, and now I'm mixing a little bit darker color to do some other areas. Now anything you paint first is going to be underneath, of course, and then you can print more things on top of that if you want to. So I'm starting kind of with the background areas, and again I'm not really being too particular or careful because I know that I can print the details on top of that. Now at this point I'm deciding that I want to start doing those darker shadows on the side of the robot. I decided to fill that whole area in because I can paint the details on it later. And just a little bit more blue here. You can see I'm using a pretty big brush because I don't have to really be too careful at this point. Okay, hooray, I get to pull another print. And here comes my blue layer. Now you can see it. The rest of this is going to be maybe using, well, I'm still using a big brush here to do his great big red robot shoes. And I'm just going to pull that area before I go on to some other details. You'll notice here that I don't have to press down on all of the paper because I just did the shoes, so I just pressed that one part. And now I'm going to clean my block again before I go on to the finer details because I don't want all this extra paint going and making a big mess. And now I'm ready. I've got a smaller brush. I'm going to start doing some of the smaller details. And when you're looking through this block, actually, since it's about a 1/4 of an inch thick, sometimes it helps to kind of close one eye so your depth perception is better. Since we're seeing this from the side, it kind of looks like I'm not really painting on it, but that's just because of the thickness of the block. It's giving you a different perspective than I have when I'm seeing it from directly above. So now I'm making some highlights. I'm doing most of the red areas. I decided that the outlines of his little control box are going to be pink. And one of the reasons I like monoprinting it like this is I actually like accidents to happen, and I don't like to be too fussy with it. I have a tendency to be too realistic anyway. So one of the fun things for me about doing this type of printing is just finding out what happens when you get a little surprise. One thing I forgot to mention actually, the reason that we put this plexiglass over the top of our reference image is that the gelatin would stick to paper, and the paper kind of wants to fuse itself with your gelatin if you were to put your reference image directly below. So that's the reason. You can use any kind of sheet of clear hard plastic, or you could even use glass, but obviously plexiglass is a little bit safer. So just a few more little details here. And we can pull our print. So once again, I'm going to go on to finer details from here, so I need to clean my block again. And my paper is still holding quite a bit of paint on it, so it may end up depositing little bits of paint onto my block each time I print. So even if I didn't remember painting an area, I still need to clean my block again, or it may start to get mushy looking. So I decided his eyes weren't quite white enough, so I'm going to add a little bit more white to those eye areas. Again, it looks like, from this perspective, it looks like I'm not actually painting on his eyes, but from above, I'm aligned with what the picture really looks like. So I'm just picking up those white areas. And when I press down, when I'm printing, the paint is going to blob out a little bit. It kind of smushes down. So you have to paint a little bit finer and a little bit thinner than you think. Now I'm going to be adding the black details. Okay, now we jump into hyperspace mode because I figure you didn't want to have to watch me paint every single last detail. So zip, 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 lots of black coming on here and the rest of the details. And then we're going to just add the very last lines. And it's going to be time to pull another print. So now I got most of my details. Okay, before I detach my print, I want to make sure that I get the paint that has jumped onto my fingers off of there so that I don't get smudges on my print when I'm removing the tape. So here I go, looks pretty good. And now I can take it off. And that's what it looks like. I feel like it needs a little bit more detail. A couple of the parts didn't come through. So I'm going to cheat. There isn't any sheriff of monoprinting that I know about. So I'm just going to go ahead and add those little black dots in his eyes that I just couldn't seem to manage. If I had let it dry between prints, I wouldn't have the smudging that was going on with his eyes. So I'm doing a little cheating here. Just going to fix up the details a bit. Give some awesome robot teeth. Make sure all his gauges look extremely realistic. Okay, so this is what my final print looked like. And I guess it probably took me about 20 minutes overall. When I was finished, I wrote the title, monotype, and my name at the bottom in pencil underneath the print.